This is the end, beautiful friend. This is the end, my only friend, the end.
Throughout the course of our human civilization, there has never been any concept which has inspired more fear, awe, and despair than the notion of death. Obviously, it is also the subject of a most profound ignorance. These are the basic questions we generally have regarding death. Why do we age and why do we die? What happens during the transition from life to death? Is there a life after death, or do we retain our consciousness after we leave the body? If there is a life after death, then where do we go? Is there such a thing as reincarnation? And if so, how did that process even begin? Is there a connection between our alternating life and death sequence and evolution? And finally, is there any truth to those divine encounters many people have reported in their near-death experiences? And if so, why does it occur and what does it mean? All of these ideas are based on a theory I developed called fractal bifurcations, which I outline in this book titled The Sentient Universe. The book proposes a universe that is steeped in meaning and purpose, where consciousness is its quintessential feature and evolution has a very well-defined objective and an eventual destination. Within the sentient universe, life and death of all living creatures, wherever in the universe they may be, plays an important role in the fulfillment of the cosmic agenda. I have several videos which explain the basic ideas behind this theory, including one that describes the origin and the nature of consciousness itself, which is indispensable for organizing any semblance of meaning. There are several different elements that come into play when trying to understand the transition into death and the death phase, mainly the energy body. The substance of space. This space around us is a substance and it has characteristics of its own, and that's where we reside during our death phase. Evolution and consciousness. And one thing for certain, far from being some ridiculous and dreadful oblivion, the death phase is a truly, truly profound experience. When we go there, it appears to be more real than life itself.
Come on, baby, don't feel the reaper. Baby, take my hand, don't feel the reaper. We'll be able to fly, don't feel the reaper. Baby, I'm your man.
We have an energy body alongside our physical body. During life, the function of the energy body remains subdominant, even though it is vital to our existence. The principal function of the energy body during life is the maintenance of the individual's physical and mental state, orchestrating countless billions of minute electrochemical adjustments in our nervous system, which occurs through every cell in our body. Those are subconscious operations which occur through the energy body consciousness. Why? Because the energy body consciousness is an integrated form of consciousness. When we die, only the physical body falls apart and disintegrates, but the energy body is able to retain its integrity and cohesiveness. So how did that begin? I explained what our energy body is, its origins and its functions in my YouTube videos on life, so I'm not going to repeat that information here. However, there is a very important feature concerning our energy body which is absolutely indispensable for understanding what happens to us during death. It has to do with the most significant evolutionary adaptation that had occurred since first life, and this happened at the onset of the Cambrian era. For over 3 billion years after life appeared, the planet was populated by nothing more sophisticated than microbial life. From first life onward, all life forms had an energy body alongside with its physical body. But when a microbe died, both the physical body as well as the energy body dissipated. Then, about 550 million years ago, life on the planet underwent the most significant evolutionary adaptation to date, an event well known to science as the Cambrian explosion. This was when microbial life, for the first time, became animal life. And this was the crucial adaptation. When an animal died, the energy body developed the ability to retain its integrity when the physical body fell apart and disintegrated. This was a tremendously significant adaptation because the energy body was not only capable of retaining its integrity, but also the transformative gains achieved during each life term. These gains would continue from one life to the next and the next, and evolutionary transformation became a cumulative process. At this stage, for the first time, evolution became individualized, and with it, the evolutionary process shifted into high gear. This resulted in an extraordinary profusion of animal life in what has come to be known as the Cambrian explosion. The energy body of all animals began evolving from one stage to the next, assuming one form after another and another, from one species to the next. So who do you think were those animals in this long trail of our evolutionary transformation, stretching over hundreds of millions of years? It was none other than us all along. It was you and me and all the rest of the people on this planet. We were those trilobites that swam the ancient Cambrian seas. We were the amphibians that first walked on land. We were the dinosaurs that stomped the earth and ruled for over 170 million years. We were those mammals that took over and eventually became those hominids that left Africa and spread across the world. It was always us all along. We are the same bunch of actors that strutted and fretted our R upon the stage and then retreated backstage to reappear once more with a completely new identity and a completely new act. The process of reincarnation began at the onset of the Cambrian era and will continue for the entire duration of this animal phase of our evolution. Reincarnation begins with a process I call inhabitation, where the energy body enters a zygote, which is a fertilized egg. Only after inhabitation does pregnancy actually begin and a fetus starts to develop. If inhabitation fails to occur within a certain period of time, the fertilized egg is flushed out of the female body. Once inhabitation takes place, the fetal phase recapitulates the entire evolutionary transformation which the energy body had undergone, stretching across many hundreds of millions of years from the very beginning of its existence. Quite obviously, that information is retained within our energy body, and we see that in the various stages of the fetal development. Once the energy body arrives at the vibratory state of its current incarnation, the fetus is ready to be born. Once an animal dies, the energy body shifts into dominance, and in the death phase, it goes through an assimilation process where the structural imprints inherited from the life just lived is processed and incorporated into the energy body. Once the assimilation process has been completed, the energy body is primed to assume form once again. The process is not unlike the sleeping and waking cycles in our daily life, except that in death it occurs across a much longer period of time. So in a very real sense, our energy body is who we really are. That is what survives and evolves from one life to the next. Our experiences during life, especially those which generate a tremendous amount of intensity, lays down deep imprints upon our energy body, and we carry them into the death phase. These energetic imprints play a crucial role in defining our next incarnation. The prevailing scientific notion on evolution is that it's a series of happy chance mutations. Mutations are not evolution. Mutations are malfunctions in the structuring process during the fetal phase. There can never be anything wrong or corrupted in the energy body itself because the energy body functions as an integrated system. Evolutionary changes actually occur because of the intention of the energy body during the death phase. Intentions that stem from the assimilation process. Once the assimilation process is completed, it initiates a vibratory shift in the energy body, which in turn translates that into minor shifts in our DNA structure during the energy body's next incarnation. The cause of evolution ultimately is the intention of the energy body during the death phase, and not because of happy chance accidents. The next essential concept we need to consider is where we go when we die. When an animal dies, the energy body becomes liberated from the confines of the physical body, and it is released into the substance of space. So this space surrounding us is actually like a veil, like a curtain, where on one side resides the structured universe of matter where we participate during life and where the physical body dominates. On the flip side, behind this curtain, lies the energy field where the energy body dominates during our death phase. This repeated alternation between life and death is key to the evolutionary process. And so space is the predominant substance in the universe, and that's where we reside during our death phase. Consciousness is the third essential concept necessary for understanding dying and the death phase. I have a detailed explanation of consciousness in my YouTube videos, what it is, where it arises, and how it informs us. And trust me, it's not what you think. Briefly, consciousness is not a byproduct of our biology as generally assumed. Awareness flows through all aspects of the universe, and our physical bodies are actually biotemplates expressing that awareness as distinct kinds of consciousness. Consciousness lies at the root of all our experiences, and the death phase is ultimately a state of consciousness. What we refer to as consciousness in life is cognitive consciousness, which is only one kind of consciousness which rests upon several other layers of consciousness. The death phase embodies a deeper layer of consciousness which is radically different from the consciousness we embody during life. The fundamental difference between life and death consciousness is that whereas life requires a consciousness that is based on structures, for instance, everything we think about or talk about is based on some kind of a structure, The death phase, on the other hand, embodies a consciousness that is non-structural. It is an energetic consciousness. Now, we may not be aware of this energetic consciousness during our waking states, but it is closer to us than you can imagine. In the perspective I am proposing, life and death are like two sides of the same coin. You can't have one without the other. Since the energy body is without structures, there is nothing that can really harm the individual during the death phase within the domain of space. At the moment of death, the animal's energy body shifts to a dominant state, whereas a life phase is dominated by cognitive consciousness, which is based on structures and which fosters intellectual and emotional understanding. By contrast, the death phase is dominated by an energetic consciousness, which is a completely different way of apprehending the universe. Here, the consciousness is not cognitive nor intellectual, but experiential. In this chart, you will see that there are 5 basic states of consciousness which we embody during life and death. These 2 states, cognitive consciousness and streaming consciousness, become the dominant consciousness during life. Cognitive consciousness is what you are using right now to follow what I am saying. Later on, when you're walking down the street, for instance, or your mind is aimlessly drifting from one state to another, you're engaged in streaming consciousness. That is easy enough to understand. And these 2 other states, dream consciousness and deep sleep consciousness, are self-explanatory. They are the states of consciousness during our sleep phase. The dream state has structures, but they are subordinate to energetic consciousness. But in this deep sleep state, structured consciousness no longer operates and the experience becomes purely energetic. We never remember the deep sleep nor the death phase because they don't build structures, and memories require structures. The energetic experience is an entirely different language of consciousness, but it is one that we can actually learn to experience during life, and that will go a very long way toward dispelling our fears about death.
When I die and I lay me to rest, gonna go to the place that's the best. When I lay me down to die, going up to the spirit in the sky.
All of these 4 states of consciousness embody some semblance of structures, whether they are cognitive or energetic structures. Structures provide definition, but they also separate and demarcate. This 5th state of consciousness, which are referred to as singularity consciousness, is completely devoid of any and all structures, neither cognitive nor energetic. This is the pure, unified experience which is truly and in the most literal sense, cosmic consciousness. This is the consciousness sought by mystics and yogis in their highest aspirations. There literally can be no higher experience than this unified state. That is because any structures imposed upon this unified awareness becomes a contamination of cosmic consciousness. This experience of complete and total liberation, free from all structural contamination, is literally the God experience which many people encounter in their near-death experiences. At the moment of death, when the energy body is released from the confines of the physical body, there is an initial sense of ecstatic emancipation, like being released from a prison. Once released from the physical body, the energy body is infused with a burst of energy, and it has a natural tendency to align with this structureless fifth state of consciousness or cosmic consciousness. Soon after death, one's consciousness naturally shifts to the structureless field and resides within this unified state for a while. Gradually, the residual structures within the energy body inherited from the life that one has just left behind start to come to the fore. When that happens, one's consciousness descends from the fifth state into these two states, which begins the process of assimilation. So during the death phase, the individual's consciousness cycles over and over between these three states. The structured residual consciousness, which are memories we inherited from the life we just left behind, which can be compared to our dream state. The deep energetic imprints embedded within the energy body, which can be compared to our deep sleep state, and finally singularity itself, which marks evolution's eventual destination. We cycle through these three states over and over during the assimilation process in the death state. It determines the shifts and adaptations for the energy body's next incarnation. So the assimilation process is not unlike the sleep and wake cycles in our daily lives. Our consciousness during our sleep state is, in a very real sense, a brief proxy experience of the death phase. Except that since the energy body functions in a subdominant state during life, we are unable to actively participate in it. Also, during our sleep state, we rarely, if ever, align with singularity consciousness. If we really want to understand the death phase, we also have to take into consideration the basic objective behind the evolutionary process and what it is trying to achieve. Only then will the alternating sequence between life and death make sense. There are some silly ideas floating around in the scientific community that evolution has been just a series of random coincidences, happy chance accidents they call it, which transformed microbial life into walking, talking Homo sapiens. Those ideas are so ludicrous that they are not even worth mentioning. Evolution has meaning. It has a purpose, and there is an eventual destination to this transformative process. Once we understand what it is, then we can assess the life and death process in relation to that evolutionary directive. It will provide the context for the repeated alternation between life and death and what it is trying to achieve in the process. Once we become familiar with the energetic consciousness of the energy body, we will come to realize that there has always been two basic kinds of consciousness we have engaged in throughout our evolutionary transformation as animals. A cognitive one during life and an energetic one during the death phase. Our energy body residing within the field of space is the predominant state of our existence. From there, we assume form. We run the gauntlet of life to return again back to the state of the energy body. And each alternation between life and death changes our consciousness incrementally from one stage to the next and the next. And that's the key to evolutionary transformation. Evolution today is moving 1,000 times faster than it did during the time of the dinosaurs. That's because the changes at our current stage of evolution is not occurring in our anatomical body, but in our nervous system, which is unique to hominid evolution. In the fractal bifurcations theory, the anatomical body and the nervous system are two bifurcated expressions of our physical form. That is the reason we do not see any significant anatomical transformations in human evolution, even though our consciousness today is transforming at an incredible pace. Our collective consciousness is changing faster today in 20 years than it did in 20 million years during the time of the dinosaurs. The evolutionary goal in the transformation of consciousness is about eventually transcending this very duality between life and death and finally arriving at the structureless singularity consciousness, which will mark the beginning of our shift over to the third and planetary phase of evolution from our current animal phase. The next phase in our evolutionary transformation is not going to come because we got slammed by some asteroid or comet. The next phase in our evolutionary transformation is going to come because we have finally come to understand what evolution has been trying to achieve all along. And with that knowledge, we will deliberately bring that transformation upon us, and that is precisely what evolution intends as well. Evolution is all about the transformation of consciousness, and structures facilitate transformation. Since the energy body residing within the spatial field lacks structures, it makes any effective transformation quite impossible. And that is why the energy body is compelled to assume form over and over again. Also, change occurs in slow increments. The physical and mental demands of a life form in its participation in the world engages the play of consciousness. That in turn facilitates its transformation. Evolution is a cumulative process and change occurs in slow increments. Evolution is a steady transformation of consciousness toward increasing complexity from one stage to the next and the next until it finally arrives at cosmic consciousness.
Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door.
There is one other aspect of space that is absolutely vital to both the physical body and the energy body. It has to do with the perpetual universal expansion of space, which in current astronomical lingo is referred to as the work of dark energy, which they are not sure what it is. What that means, though, is that there is a perpetual infusion of energy into the substance of space, both into the substance of free space which surrounds us, as well as the space confined within the substance of matter or the physical bodies of life forms. The definition for life according to this theory, fractal bifurcations, is that life is an expansion-dominant integrated system. In other words, that force which causes space to expand with a slight but perpetual acceleration is also the same force that induces a life form to grow from infancy to maturity, or from a seed to a tree. Our general notion is that we grow through the act of ingesting nutrients. That much is true. However, there is an additional step along the way. The force that causes the perpetual expansion of space, which is dark energy, also causes a life form's energy body to expand, since it too is composed of the substance of space. But unlike space, the energy body being confined within the physical body is unable to freely expand. Therefore, it compels the physical body to grow and expand. That compulsion is experienced by the life form as hunger, compelling it to ingest nutrients from the surrounding environment. So throughout its existence, it is this perpetual expansion of the energy body which compels the physical body to keep growing. However, the physical body is only capable of expanding just so far. After reaching maturity, in its efforts to reduce and stave off the constant onslaught of the perpetually expanding energy body, the physical body begins to gradually shut down and rigidify in slow and incremental steps. This initiates the process of aging in a life form. As the process of rigidifying continues, the physical body grows progressively older until at a certain point the bond between the physical body and energy body becomes severed, and that marks the moment of death for the animal. And the energy body, now released from the confines of the physical body, sails into the substance of the surrounding space. As I had mentioned earlier, the energy body residing within the substance of space is in its home base, and life is the gauntlet that it has to run over and over and over again through the course of evolution. So for the very old and for the infirmed and for those who have outlived their productive life, this release from the confines of the physical body is truly an experience of liberation. And where is that energy generated? It is generated within the hundreds of billions of black holes in the universe, which transmutes a tremendous amount of matter energy into singularity, from where it is recycled back into our universe. So our universe became a self-sustaining system. So as such, each lifetime is compelled to assimilate more energy than the previous one. This fact is vital for the perpetual upward ascendancy in the evolutionary process, which is quite obvious. Each new lifetime always embodies a little more energy and is a little more complex than its previous incarnation. That is not only true with the evolution of species, but we can also see it in the evolution of our civilization. Each succeeding generation utilizes and expends more energy than the previous one. And if you are looking for a detailed explanation, you'll find them in these chapters in the book. The substance of space functions as an integrated energy field, and during the death phase, it allows the energy body of an animal to interact with the energy bodies of other strands of life within that environment and build some of the amazing symbiotic relationships we see in evolution between animals or between plants and animals. These adaptations are ultimately rooted in the animal's intentions within its energetic consciousness during the death phase. Darwin's notion of natural selection, from this perspective, is at best a very superficial interpretation of the evolutionary process. And that should not be a surprise, because without knowing what precisely defines life, nor the essential nature of consciousness, it is impossible to understand evolution. All evolution occurs because of the intention of the energy body during the death phase. So most of what I've said over here regarding the death phase does not come from speculation, but from experience. The knowledge base of the energy body is not cognitive nor intellectual, it is energetic. a language of consciousness we have yet to learn in our ascent of evolutionary transformation. The strategy I discovered to explore consciousness involves the ingestion of a certain herbal concoction which has the remarkable ability to immediately shift one's consciousness from cognitive consciousness to the energy body consciousness. I have journeyed into these states many, many times over, and the profundity of these experiences is truly monumental. This herbal concoction I mentioned is, I believe, a legitimate doorway toward this new understanding. That is because it is literally quite impossible to align these alternate states from our normal state of consciousness without an external agent. And it is not only safe, I believe it has enormous therapeutic potential as well. Once one becomes familiar with these states of consciousness in the energy body, it is even possible to arrive at singularity consciousness or cosmic consciousness. This truly is the sublime structureless consciousness beyond which it is literally impossible to go.
There's a feeling I get when I look to the west, and my spirit is crying for leaving.
The transition from life to death can be a pretty traumatic and frightening experience, and from the energy body's perspective, necessarily so, for life may have easily opted for death whenever a serious challenge arose, and that would have defeated or thwarted the entire evolutionary process. Keep in mind that we have all lived a million lives and died a million deaths throughout our evolutionary history. So in conclusion, we can debate and intellectualize death and dying until the rivers run dry, but ultimately death is a purely experiential state. A direct experience of the energy body is the only way to dispel that fear associated with death. In fact, once we come to terms with the experience of the energy body consciousness and become familiar with it, then the moment of death will no longer be associated with the dread of the unknown, but as a doorway into a grand and exciting new adventure. And for the truly enlightened among us, the moment of death will appear as though one's entire life has been a preparation for this transition from the duality of alternating life and death sequences into the experience of the sublime and transcendental cosmic consciousness. That is the ultimate experience of freedom possible from our current animal phase of evolution.